I don't know if people find this as interesting as I do. It's one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard, and not just because it's a relative, but honestly, whenever I think my life's difficult or I'm getting frustrated, I think about what my great-grandmother might say, the lady who raised Granny, and it really puts things into perspective. So over the weekend, a lot of people sent me articles about Biden being the first president to formally acknowledge the Armenian genocide. There seems to be a whole political song and dance behind this that is way above my pay grade, but regardless, it makes me think of Granny's mom, aka Great Granny. For those unfamiliar, on April 24th, 1915, the Ottoman Empire gathered a bunch of Armenian intellectuals and community leaders and began the systematic process of cleansing the Ottoman Empire of ethnic Armenian. By the time the genocide ended, it's estimated that around 1 million Armenians were killed, which proportionally is more drastic than the amount of Jews killed in the Holocaust. Not that anyone's keeping score. As far as my great-grandmother's story, sometime around the age of 12, she went to school and she came home and her mother and brother were not there. They were never seen or heard from again. Being that her father had left for America to establish himself and bring his family over, Great Granny had no other options than to go and check herself into an orphanage. Eventually, the orphanage was overrun by Turks, and Granny was actually one of the lucky few who was taken by a wealthy Turkish family as a slave. And I say lucky because the other option was a death march into the desert. From my understanding, there was an Armenian resistance and a network that was somewhat similar to the Underground Railroad that we had here in America. And at some point, Great Granny was able to send word to her father in America, and her father found her a husband and arranged for her to be snuck out of Turkey and brought into Cuba. And this was like years later. She wasn't getting married at 12 years old. I believe she was 17 or 18 at the time she got married. She gets to Cuba, and 3 days after meeting this guy that her dad picked out for her, she married him. After they wed, they bounced around the Northeast for a little bit before eventually settling down in the Bronx, where they had 2 kids, one of them being my granny, and my granny would serve as translator for their broken English whenever they ventured outside of their Armenian community. Like most people in that generation, Great Granny never wanted to talk about it and didn't like to dwell in the past. But one thing that she did say about it, which I think is super cool and a lesson that I think we can all try to apply to every day of our lives, is that she didn't hold anything against the Turkish people, that it does no good to be angry today about what people did in the past. And I just think if somebody who had their entire life uprooted, who lost their mother and brother with no notice, who was forced into slavery and then had to escape to another country where she didn't even speak the language, to marry a guy that she never even met before, if she can say that, I like to think I can be a little more patient with my first world problems in 2021.